5:59 is Linda.
Not yet.
Kristen's one.
Yeah.
So we have Ronnie. We have a quorum. Should we want to vote? Not really big on voting in subcommittees because everything has to go to the council anyway, also one.
We have 3 out of 5, so. And that is a quorum, right?
You unmuted?
Yep.
Hello. See you Linda?
No. But we are streaming. Oh, lost Crystal.
So Ronnie, we have a competent professional here tonight.
Hey. Who's that?
All the people are wearing glasses.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Now you might have missed it, Crystal. Yesterday we had IT difficulties, so that was the.
Oh, okay, so maybe it wasn't me.
No. She's saying that we have competent people, so I included you in there.
Thank you.
It was my absence. My apologies.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock as the legal committee meeting for December 7th. Roll call, we have Art here in the room. We have Ronnie online and Margaret. I do not see Ryan. We have Linda Fenhoff. We have Crystal. I do not see Tom. And we have Michael. I think that's it. Did I miss anyone? Okay, so we have a fairly short agenda tonight. First item is the speed limit reduction. So this is something that we had discussed at previous meetings. I had gotten a quote from Creighton Manning. It's a fairly straightforward process. They have done it in other municipalities. I discussed it with them. I got a quote from them for, you want to bring up the Creighton Manning quote? I believe the total amount on that one was 7,500. Yeah, 7,500. And it's a fairly straightforward process. I have also received from the police department some reports on accidents of it, putting together data for a year. We don't have speed data per se, but I don't think that's necessary. I let Creighton Manning know exactly what we have. So then when I met with Tracy to see what the next steps were, I found out that I needed a second written quote for our policy. So I went back to another engineering company that I had spoken to about 2 months ago. If you want to pull up that one. They came back with, they have also done this in other municipalities. I believe they have done work in Rensselaer County, as far as I recall. They are not as familiar with Hudson, and in their quote, their total dollar amount was, I think, in the neighborhood of 16, a little over 16,000. So, Tom DiPietro has just joined us, Linda. So my thing on this, I talked to Rob Perry also about Creighton Manning. They are very familiar with the city, they're very familiar with the streets. In my discussion with them, they were just okay with everything that we were trying to do here. Given the price differential, my recommendation would be that we go with the Creighton Manning proposal and that we bring this forward to the full council to move forward on this. There don't seem to be any issues with it. With regard to rationale, I can go into that with full council. New York City did a presentation. They have reduced their speed limits from 30 to 25 miles an hour at NICOM at the beginning of the year. I looked up some of their data. There are significant differences in fatality rates for pedestrians. In an accident at 25 miles an hour, it's like half the mortality rate versus 30 miles per hour. The stopping distance is significantly lower at 25, which also reduces collisions. So, you know, the data, it's kind of interesting that just that small difference makes such a significant difference in outcomes. And also from the point of view of the size of our city, that differential will make very little difference to how long it takes to go from the bottom of Warren Street up to Fairview. It's like seconds. So I see no downside to this, and if everybody's in agreement, we will take it to the full council and move on.
Great.
Any questions, Ronnie, Dwan? Have you muted them?
I think they're all right.
Okay. So, before we move on to the next thing, which is the, I think Crystal's gonna walk us through this. Crystal and I met earlier to go through this. I just wanna make one reference, it's not on the agenda tonight. On the mayor's resolution to expand the code to include, the 7th Street Park and Promenade Hill, for locations where, as well as, streets, for locations where, alcohol may be, served at private functions. Ronnie, you had suggested that I check in with FOPS on this after, I think at our last council meeting, so I did email FOPS and got a response back from them that they, had actually requested, at an event that didn't happen, they had requested permission to have alcohol at an event. And so from their perspective, they do not have an issue with it. So we can talk about that at the full council. I think the two issues that I cited that have been discussed in our council meeting were, the location of the park, as being in the center, a location that people pass through as opposed to a destination, which is what Promenade Hill and the waterfront are. And then there were concerns raised about, the homeless, presence of people with addiction in that area. So those are things that the full council can discuss. But since it didn't come through this, committee, I didn't put it on the agenda tonight, but I think it's ready now to move forward. Any questions on that from anyone? So I think Tom probably would be in a position to vote on that at the next meeting, because the only thing that came up was circling back with Fox.
Okay.
I thought it was coming from you. Okay, so Crystal, we're going to talk now about the tree ordinance. I think it's probably best if I gave you what I had abstracted from Hillary's comments. And do you want to just take it and walk us through the revisions that you're recommending based upon Hillary's comments? Which ones you want to accept, which ones we're not going to accept?
Yes, sure. So I had gone in and sent to the committee, it was a little bit late, I apologize for that, incorporating into the version of the law that was kind of like the latest draft, those bullets that Margaret had kind of put together from the comments from Hillary. So the ones that were going to get incorporated in, such as a definition of what small caliber is going to be, establishing the Hudson Tree Board, but changing that composition so that it's, 5 members, and that we're going to try to seek representation from all of the wards as opposed to making that mandatory because of, some of the concerns about actually getting representation from all of the wards. And changing the terms based on that composition so that the terms are actually, and this is something that the council can, and the committee can.
Sorry, Crystal, can I stop you for a moment?
Yeah.
The document, Michael, that you have up is the PDF version that I have been working from, but I think Crystal had since sent a version that probably has redline, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, Michael, if you want, I can share my screen. I've got it up.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
It's the same content.
Okay. You can see my screen now?
Yeah.
Can you zoom in a little, Crystal?
I certainly can. I think I can. You tell me when I'm going a little bit too crazy. Is that good?
That's
Okay. So I put in red, or I've used track changes, the additions based on Hillary's comments. Some of it is, the language is gonna need to be tweaked a little bit before we get it over to the council, which I can do for the next council meeting if this committee decides to vote on it and move it forward, for the final law. But for example, you know, adding a definition for small caliber, because it's later on in the law, it was recommended that that be an exception for where you would need an arborist to come in, or where you might need, where you would need an arborist to come in, is to accept small caliber trees. Another definition added, which I apologize, I didn't get this one in red, was defining what minor pruning is, because again, that's something that's going to be permitted. So we need to know exactly what is going to be, how that is going to be defined.
And that definition for minor pruning, what we put in here, it came directly from Hillary's comments.
It did, yes. The other addition is where I was talking about changing the representation of the board. So it's essentially seeking representation from all 5 wards, but it is not a mandatory requirement now. It's including participation of a professionally trained or experienced municipal arborist, but someone that resides, and this is something that I added in, Margaret, or has a place of business within Columbia County. I wasn't sure what the council's preference was, but I assumed place of business or residence would probably satisfy those concerns. As well as a member of the Common Council, and then a member of the Conservation Advisory Council, as well as representation of the Department of Public Works. Everyone would end up being residents or be required to be residents of the city of Hudson, except for the arborist. That goes to the county. And then I'm sorry, was there a question? I could be going fast. If I'm going fast, tell me to slow down. And then changing the terms of the members too, just because we're changing the composition of the board. So have 2 members, the first, 2 members designated to serve 2 terms, 3 members designated to serve 3 terms, to have that staggered a little bit in the beginning before everything goes into just 3 years.
And just FYI, although Hillary had not made any comments or changes on the makeup, in communication I received back from CAC, after their last meeting, they acknowledged that they were going with a 5-member board.
Including, we talked about this at the last meeting, so adding a minimum of 6 meetings per year. So essentially, having them meet at least every other month. Obviously that can be more as necessary. Here, we keep going here, sorry. These came in from Hillary. It's the exception for the small caliper trees that I had mentioned earlier. This is something that I've added in as a recommendation, that the board would have discretion to authorize waivers if it determines that the trees that are going to be removed pose a low risk of personal or property damage. And I added that in because Hillary had mentioned that with the small caliper trees, meaning that exceptions for small caliber trees, if they pose that a low risk of injury, personal injury or property damage. I thought there may be other incidents that we might not be thinking of now that could qualify, or that the board might want to grant a waiver on, and I thought it would be good to give them that discretion.
That, I think, Crystal, that language appeared in a section that related not to public trees but to private, where the exception was if it was low risk of, you didn't need an arborist if it was low risk of injury to person or property. It appears elsewhere in the document.
Okay, because I thought it had 2, but I saw 7A on the notation, so I put it in, but I might have misread that.
Let me go back to my document. Hang on. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did put it into 7A. It was in our comment on 7A. Exceptions include small caliber dead trees with low risk of causing personal or property damage during removal. It was under the original 7A.
Okay, and that's where we had comments going back and forth with Hillary too on that document that she had marked up as well.
Yep, that's correct. But did you leave in the word dead?
Did I what?
In her language, she had said, with the exception of small caliper dead trees.
Oh, I did leave out the word dead. I apologize. I can add that right in easily enough. And then going down a little bit further, we've got in section 8, adding language that all debris would be removed to an appropriate location. This is for the private tree removal, so that we're not saying exactly where they have to put it. They can put it wherever they're going to put it on their property, but that it's going to be removed essentially from. And as I'm talking about this, it might be good to just expand this language to just say that it needs to be removed from a place that could cause a problem with ingress or egress to the property that's required for emergency services or something to that nature.
So this issue came up with the tree that was taken down on Union Street, and the owner left well, there's a lot of debris on that property, but he just left the tree lying there, and one of the concerns was, well, this is going to be potentially a situation with vermin, with animals nesting in it and so forth. So I just put in to an appropriate location, because I borrowed that language from somewhere else in the document, but we may need to expand on that. So it's not, I think, Crystal, not just not preventing problems with egress or access to the property, but also not creating safety issues for neighboring properties, because that was the issue with that tree.
Okay, I'm just making a note. And then possibly even expanding it so that it doesn't create a nuisance for, neighboring property like owners. Maybe we revise the language like that. Okay. Continuing down, under tree restoration or mitigation, Hillary has actually recommended striking the very first paragraph that talks about property owners who have any tree removed are required to replace it with a new one of equal caliber. This was the one where I had thought that it was pretty overbroad, because any sort of removal of trees for any sort of work on someone's property would end up requiring them to replace it or to pay into a fund for it. And there had been some discussions with the committee that this could cause a little bit of pushback from the residents. So they had, go ahead.
One of the things on this, though, is in the comments on this from Hillary, her concern was that this is the exact way most trees get cut down, building and renovation. Well, building and renovation we're leaving in, because that's not an issue. And that should be left in. But yeah, I think the discussion in our meeting last time was that this would not go over well.
Correct.
And so, yeah, I think that should be removed.
And what Hillary, and this is where we get into a policy question for the council. What Hillary was talking about this is the exact place where you see a lot of trees being removed on renovations, is because I had recommended changing that second paragraph so that it only really addresses new construction or projects going before your planning board, and
Right.
having them come in and do a recommendation, the board, the tree board coming in and doing a recommendation in that area. Hillary was concerned because a lot of trees come down with renovation projects, things that just require a building permit versus a full planning board approval. And I understand her concern, but where we had talked about this last time, and there had been some discussion, is that what type of renovation projects are we talking about that would trigger this? So are you talking about, somewhat, could they be minor? Could it be someone, adding a deck onto the back of their house? things along that nature, that would technically trigger this provision. Which is why I had recommended doing, keeping it to either new construction or, new construction and projects before the planning board. If the council doesn't want to do that, then it should consider whether there are some renovation projects that it would want to accept from this requirement. Because they are considered either, routine or as a matter of course, or something that might be a fairly, large burden to the property, to a residential property owner. And perhaps keep it, make a distinction again here between residential and commercial properties as well.
So even very, very minor modifications, if you are in the historic district, have to go before the historic preservation committee or council, whatever.
Isn't it like anything that changes the appearance?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Doesn't matter what it,
Yeah.
doesn't matter what it is, yeah.
fences, anything, the slightest thing.
If it's visible.
If it's visible, but that's only if it's in the historic district.
Right.
And so I think, Crystal, your point about, we should be clear on whether we're talking about commercial or residential. And if it's not in the historic district, all you would need is a work permit in most cases. So if you're putting up a fence or, in my case, putting in a garage door, all I would have needed was a work permit. But what if your case of putting up a deck, for example, if you have a property non-historic district, and you're putting up a deck and you want to take out trees, should that fall under this? And then, the paragraph that we took out above, Crystal, which would essentially, the case I was thinking of, somebody has trees in their backyard, they want to take them down. They're not renovating anything, they're maybe just re-landscaping the backyard and they want to take it down. What is that renovation? Is re-landscaping renovation? So I think this paragraph is a little bit fuzzy, actually. What are we intending?
I don't think there's any way to even be aware of the scenario you just pointed
I
out.
want to take my tree down.
Yeah. And there's nothing being built, nothing, just
Right,
landscape.
yes, exactly. I have a tree on my property, doesn't overhang. I want to get rid of it.
Yeah,
I guess-
that first paragraph would have encompassed anything, essentially anything. So whether it needed a building permit or not, it would have
Yep.
encompassed any sort of tree removal on private property. It's fairly broad. The second one is more specific to building permits. But then the question is there any sort of, again, minor renovations or something routine that the council would want to accept from these requirements?
Well, in this one, part of what it's talking about is protecting existing trees, including fencing around an entire drip line of tree, no heavy equipment driving over the road, etc. I think if there's a permit, it wouldn't hurt for the tree board to look and say, yep, it's fine. So for example, I'm putting a fence up. And by the way, I'm also going to take a tree down. I have a work permit to put my fence up. And then they would have to say, yeah, okay, you're within your rights to take a tree down, because that's just landscape.
In most cases, what I'm reading is that most tree ordinances only deal with public trees.
But
So just throwing it out here, what if this only pertained to construction or renovation that impacted public trees? Would that
I think
help at all?
that's not a good idea. Because let's say you have, it should be looked at. So for example, the property up on Union Street on the right-hand side beside the police department that's becoming a hotel. So I think if they're going to do construction, that's all, none of that is on public street. They're going to do construction and take down a lot of trees and so on. That really should be looked at. And actually, that's part
But
of
that is being looked at.
The planning board will consider, you're saying the tree
Right,
committee
those
should.
are, but those are, what I'm saying, Michael, is those are private trees, so
Yeah.
if we restrict it to public, then something like that, which is being looked at, and is being looked at as far as site plan, would fall outside. And I think it shouldn't, that kind of thing shouldn't fall outside. Somebody taking a tree down in the backyard is not really what we want to calculate.
Right.
So what I will say is this here is far broader than what I've seen in other types of ordinances. What I typically see is what Michael had mentioned, where you're protecting, you know, trees that are either, you know, public trees or trees that shade the public way, or going a step further and having it so that any, you know, project such as, you know, your hotel project that is going through a planning board approval would be required to get a referral and a recommendation from the tree board to have it reviewed. You're not typically seeing it on, you know, those smaller type private renovation projects. Now, if the council wants to go there, that's fine, but I'm just mentioning that that's typically what I'm seeing is that this provision here is a bit broader than what you would typically see.
I mean, we can leave it to the full council to discuss. I don't think we really want to get into, just a small private property redoing landscape.
Right, I agree.
You know, that seems like overreach. But one thing, Crystal, that I had inserted in here, in part because of the issues that we had with private dangerous trees, we added a paragraph in here specifically to address the scenario because code enforcement, despite the fact that we had a tree that was dangerous, there was nothing in the code to allow Craig to do anything about it, and it was outside the purview of DPW. And so I think having something in here relating to private trees that are dangerous and a danger to neighboring properties, I think that should stay in. But if we can craft this so that it's not getting into somebody doing a private landscaping project, I think that would be fine. I don't think we have anyone from CAC on tonight. I know that Hillary had a conflict.
So this, I mean, and it was this section that I had the most,
Yeah.
I think that there needed to be more guidance from the council as to what the council really wants here, what the committee really wants here, and whether, how broad you want this to be. So that I would say is still a talking point, where this really needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. If you do want this to be, and I do recommend that there be provisions added to the city's zoning law that talks about a mandatory referral by the planning board to the tree board on projects that are before the planning board. And that was, I had provided some sample language at the last legal committee meeting that I would recommend adding into the city's zoning law that would require that type of referral. And that way it's not as, I mean, technically the planning board should be looking at this as part of the speaker review anyway. But that makes it a little bit more formal, and you have, you know, someone else coming in and providing specific recommendations and looking at this very specific issue. Other than that, I'm looking, I think that was it. That was it on the substantive changes based on Hillary's comment to the document Margaret had put together.
So do you think this is ready to go to the full council, Tom? Or do you think we need to do more on that last paragraph?
I think Crystal thinks we should. I don't know.
It's not up to me though, it's up to you guys.
Crystal, do you?
For discussion or-
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to make some proposed changes so that it captures the intent here, which is if you have a project other than domestic landscaping, that requires, well, like the hotel, they have to go before the planning board. That would have to have a component of it that looks at trees. I think
Well,
if
right
we,
now it already does. So domestic landscaping would typically never require a building permit. So that,
well, not necessarily, because if you're putting up a fence, you have to have a permit. And if part of what you're doing is you're gonna fence in your area and you're gonna take out some trees and so on, you might very well have a situation where you have a permit.
okay.
Because we have permits for a lot of things, right?
All right, so with the exception of say like the fencing requirement, and I can talk to Craig too, if he can think of any other minor projects that he comes across on a regular basis that would require a permit and we may not want, in here. But otherwise, I mean, it is written so that any sort of renovation, and I guess that what might be the next question is, what are we considering renovation? I would assume it's anything that's going to affect, anything that might end up resulting in cutting down a tree or damaging a tree in the process of being constructed. But essentially, any renovation that you're going to do to your residential home is going to be covered under this.
Oh, we have a hand raised here, Carol. Carol Ostrich has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted, I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to add, and I believe
Carol,
Was-
you're breaking up. Would it be possible for you to
Escape.
disconnect from audio and call in on a phone line?
Sure, or I or the check's disabled. I
Carol, I think if you either mute or disconnect audio and go to the calendar page and then use the instructions for calling in by phone. Because you're breaking up. So, Krista, while we're waiting for Carl to come back, kind of think anything that goes before the planning board would be sufficient.
Yeah, because they definitely look at it.
Yeah, they do. I think that would be sufficient and they make a referral to the tree board. Because if somebody is building a deck and it didn't have to go to historic and it doesn't have to, it's not a big issue and they want to redo their backyard while they're doing it. That wouldn't be before the planning board, would it?
No, just needs a building permit.
Yeah, building permit, then Craig would say whether or not it needs to go here, there, or yonder. Yeah, I think probably, Crystal, if we restrict it to planning board, that would capture what we're trying to do.
Okay, and that's easy enough. I can get that language changed, and add the planning board language that would be proposed for the zoning law to require that referral, for the next, in time for the formal council meeting. So if you want to refer it, I can add that in.
Yeah. Yeah, we can, to look at it in informal, and then we can take it to the
Yep.
formal. I'm not seeing whether Carl came back in on a phone line.
While we're waiting, I did want to ask Crystal, one of the reasons why we go for a tree ordinance is to be able to apply for specific funding that requires, having the ordinance, and one of the sort of necessary clauses that is identified by the Tree City USA program is a delegation of authority and responsibility clause. I'm not seeing it in the draft that I have, but perhaps in the amended version, there is such a clause, or if it
There
is
is a section
the
on
section 4 that would effectively work as a delegation clause.
It has, but it does talk to the authority of the field board.
Okay,
Crystal, I can't remember which section that's in, but there is a
Powers and
section in
duties.
there on the authority of the tree board.
Yeah, and I'll double check to make sure that the language in here is what's going to be needed to satisfy for funding obligations.
thank you.
Carl is muted and I don't see a phone. I'll just try something here. Hi, are you able, oh, I'm got a new crafter. Are you able to call in by phone?
On speaker.
Yeah, can you give me an example and then I'm gonna repeat what you said back to the committee? I'm gonna try and repeat that. I hope you can hear us, okay? Okay. Okay, sorry, I was getting the feedback and it's attached to my ears and I don't know how to, so I can't put her on speaker because she's in my head.
Right.
So, Carl's point is that one of the reasons for wanting to put a tree board in place was to prevent wholesale cutting down of trees on properties for not necessarily things that were going before planning board, but somebody coming in and just cutting down trees wholesale. And that many valuable and old trees were lost. And Carl, if I misstate here, you can text us. And not necessarily projects that would go before planning board. In terms of an example that she gave was a number of firs that were cut down on Union Street, near 25 Union, which is a Galvan property. And that Galvan has done that on other properties. However, and Carol, again, text your response here so we can read it out. That project would have done before the planning board.
Definitely. And
Right. I don't know what that particular one is.
so it's 25, she said 25
25 Union.
Union.
I'm not quite sure what
I'm
that
sure
is.
it's other than, I'm thinking 20. Allen.
Is that the old school that was getting turned into a hotel? Is that,
No, that's Allen.
oh, that's out.
I don't know what's on 25 Union.
Okay.
So Carol, in those instances of a developer coming in and doing any work, well, for one thing, anything on Union would have had to go also before historic as well as the planning board, I think. But I think, I don't know. So if someone had a there is a large private property, I think there's some on Union where you could decide from landscaping point of view, take down quite a few trees without going before the planning board. That is possible. What was 25?
This is Ellen, this is
That's Alan,
25
no,
Ave.
Union is, well, she's talking to you.
Yeah, I'd say we're. Is that the empty lot?
Carl, you want to try unmuting and see if we can hear you?
Something, any trees on,
There's no tree there.
yeah. Unless it's the empty lot.
if there are some large properties where this could be an issue, one way to address it would be to require a, something similar to what we've got in here, a tree permit, but maybe set, you know, a max or a minimum amount of trees. So if there's gonna be more than X
Right.
number of trees cut in a certain time frame, because there are some people that like try to get around these things by doing it, you know, over, you know, a couple months or a couple years. But if there's gonna be, you know, more than so many trees cut of this caliber, then they would have to be required to come in, get their tree permit and go through this whole process.
Yeah, and we could say anything requiring that removed, say, 2 or more large caliber trees requires a permit. What do you think of that? That sound reasonable? And we can ask Hillary if that's reasonable, more than 2.
Hard to, I mean, how will the property owner know that? You know, before they,
It will be, okay, I don't need a permit.
I mean, if they go for.
No, but they would need a permit. So that would be essentially a cutting permit. You see some municipalities have it for over a certain amount of trees. Some of it's certain amount of, like, some of it's like an acre, but
Right, but
Um,
what we're saying, Christopher, what we're saying is, if I have a property and I don't, whatever I'm doing does not require a, work permit, and I have just decided in my fictitious half-acre property that doesn't exist in the city of Hudson, that I'm going to take down 4 trees. I'm not doing anything else. I don't need a work permit. I'm not in this dark area. I just go out and I cut down my trees. And what Tom is saying is, how would somebody know that they need to get a permit to do that if we said,
this is gonna be the lawyer in me. Technically, residents, citizens are on notice of the laws that are written in their books. Whether, you know, there are some municipalities that require a fence permit, there's some municipalities that don't require a fence permit. It's technically up to the homeowner to call the building department to find that out or face, you know, enforcement or penalty actions. But it might also be, you know, incumbent upon the city as well to put some notifications out there or give a time frame in which this is going to take place. So maybe it doesn't take place upon, you know, that requirement doesn't take place upon filing with the Secretary of State. That one, you know, you give a little leeway so that residents start becoming on notice of it.
we could put it on the website? For residents,
Yeah, of
no,
course.
we could put it in the website for residents and
Sure,
if you could even put something as once it goes in effect, you could even put a notification
Yeah.
in the water bill.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like the FYI, this is a new regulation, so we could communicate.
Yeah.
Sure.
That seems reasonable.
no, I agree.
Put it on the app.
All right, I think that was it, really.
Where does the community aggregation,
I did not put that on the agenda for tonight.
because
Um,
I forget where it stands.
I'll have to go back to, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's not super urgent.
Yeah.
Oh, and the formula law. Also not.
Oh, the
super-
formula law, I have not been able to get any feedback from the, business community.
Interesting.
And at this point, I think we just move forward and do our best, and
Yeah, I agree.
it can be critiqued because I haven't gotten anywhere.
Cool.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, you shouldn't
I have to go
apologize.
back.
They should apologize.
Well, for the aggregation thing, I should apologize. I'm
Ah.
sorry, I just got by me, I apologize.
You know, it's like they're the ones who are most concerned about, I'm talking about the formula.
Yeah, I
I
know.
think they want,
I haven't gotten anything back.
okay,
All right,
that's it?
that's all I have. Any new business from anyone? I know you have lots of new business. Okay,
Oodles.
all right, so motion to adjourn,
Motion.
Ronnie, second,
Second, sorry, I was muted.
thank you all, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a good night.